This is a Weteachhistory video tutorial with Mr. O'Connor. Weimar, Germany. What impact did World War I have on Germany? The main points of this tutorial are as follows. The British blockade caused German civilians to starve, and by the end of 1918, people began to riot on the street because they were hungry and they were tired of the war. At this point as well, German soldiers and sailors started to refuse to follow orders, so discipline was breaking down in the German military. Also, many people were inspired by the events of the Russian Revolution in 1917, and they wanted to topple the Kaiser and create a more democratic country. In the mix of this, the German generals knew the war was lost, and so they decided to hand over all blame to the civilians and give them power to take the blame. So what was Germany like before the war? Well, there's the Kaiser. The Kaiser was a dictator and very powerful. Germany, although they had elections, was not very democratic. And the army, who were called the Junker class, had too much power. And the Kaiser, who was part of this military aristocracy, gave them too much power as well. This is what Germany looked like before the war. Now bear this in mind later on when we look at the Treaty of Versailles. Germany had came together as one nation in 1870, and you can see it stretches across Central Europe into the north. Germany as well, because it was a young country, didn't really have a massive empire. And you can see in the dark blotches there, they had some land in Africa. Well, along comes World War I. And although the Germans made massive advances, there was a stalemate. The British blockade stopped valuable foodstuffs coming into Germany and eventually started to wear down the German public and cause starvation and eventually rioting. On the military front, soldiers started to disobey orders. And at Kiel, the sailors, who were ordered out on one last almost suicidal mission, put down their arms and said that they weren't willing to follow their orders, and so they mutinied. Now, to mutiny is an exceptional situation in the army because it means that the soldiers and sailors were not following orders anymore, and so the army could not function. General Hindenburg and General Ludendorff, who were in charge of the Kaiser's armies, understood the writing was on the wall, and that the Kaiser could not remain in power, and that the old way of things was going to collapse, and blame was going to have to rest somewhere. The starving people of Germany also took to the streets. They were inspired by the events of 1917 in Russia, where a revolution had toppled the Russian king, the Tsar, and also ushered in a short era of democracy in Russia. And people in Germany were inspired by this, and they wanted their own taste of democracy and to get rid of the Kaiser and to end this war. You can't underestimate the power that the Russian Revolution had on world politics. It was an occasion where people such as Lenin had led a revolution and toppled a monarchy. So the generals informed the Kaiser he no longer had the respect of the army and should abdicate. So in conclusion, the British blockade had a massive effect. German civilians started to starve and then began to riot. Coupled with that, German soldiers and sailors refused to follow orders, and so military discipline broke down. People who were inspired by recent events in Russia also wanted change in Germany. The German generals understood that the war was lost and told the Kaiser he would have to abdicate because he no longer had their support. The generals also knew that if they passed over control to the civilian government, then they would get the blame for the end of the war. The Kaiser abdicated, leaving a massive power vacuum in Germany, which was to be filled by the Weimar Republic.